Oh my God, James Blunt is on the TV downstairs. Can this day get any worse?
Coming upstairs now.
Let's rewind then 20 years.
I had this complete naive confidence that when I recorded that first album, Back to Bedlam, everyone's going to buy it. You know, I really knew that this will be heard.
When did you lose it then?
I know my next album won't be as big as my first because my naive confidence that I had, I don't have anymore. And so I won't quite get it there.
This episode is supported by Huel. Welcome to High Performance.
It's very nice to see you. It's been a while.
I know. I think the last time we were together, we were racing cars around Goodwood.
Yeah.
And now here we are in these very comfy chairs.
Took me 10 years to get back to you, to find you again.
Yeah, you haven't texted or called. But I have tweeted. In fact, I tweeted today you were coming on the show.
Right. Sorry, I was busy. I was on another...
Yeah. Do you know why, though? I did it as an experiment to see what kind of messages I got back. And what do you think I got?
Well, I don't know. What did my mother say?
I got really positive messages. Really like, love James, what a legend, tell him he's a hero.
Sweet. It really was my mother.
It was mainly,
she has many burner accounts.
It was mainly your family.
And I'm too shy to admit that was me. Do you know what? It's been a journey for me because once upon a time I didn't have that kind of warmth of reaction. So I suppose you stick around long enough and people just start treating you like you're part of the furniture and people are nice to me and it's a nice place to be.
Well, can we look at some of those previous tweets that you've been sent? Because I'd be interested in you, if you can remember your comebacks on them when people...
On the whole, I can.
Okay, so...
Because I promised I wrote them and the PR team did not write them because no PR team would be quite so disgusting.
Well, give us your comeback for this one then, James. James Blunt just has an annoying face and a highly irritating voice.
And no mortgage.
Brilliant. Next one. No one really likes James Blunt, right?
I bought those 20 million albums myself.
Yes. And the final one. Oh my fucking God, James Blunt is on the TV downstairs. Can this day get any worse?
Coming upstairs now.
Thing is, though, they're funny and they're great. But I think this is a really interesting insight into the human mind because when you were getting the negative criticism, you're the same person doing the same thing. But for somehow those responses, those replies, absolutely changed the narrative of how people talk and think about James Blunt, didn't they? Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I write some pretty earnest songs and sing them in a very squeaky voice. And so I think, and also doing interviews, and if I'm asked about those, if you ask me about music, I'll be relatively serious about it. And I suppose through that medium of doing interviews, I suppose where the way journalists want to portray me was just very serious. And whenever I did do a joke, they just, on the newspapers, they wouldn't add the ha-ha. So I guess where you've got this serious guy, ubiquitous over the airwaves, and so I was just, and so people expected me serious. And then with the invention of Twitter, people realised that I'm just an idiot.
Well, you say that, but there's a really beautiful tweet that you put out there that I think marked a bit of a turning point for you, was when the death of Keith Flint from The Prodigy passed away. And I printed it out here where you wrote, at the Q Awards years ago when Noel Gallagher was saying he was leaving Ibiza because I'd moved there, and Damon Albarn refused to be in the same picture as me, and Paul Weller was saying he'd rather eat his own shit than work with me. Keith Flint came over and gave me a hug and said how thrilled he was for my success. And then the last line was, Keith, I only met you once, but I shed a tear at the news of your death. In our business, there are no prizes for being kind, but if there was, that Grammy would be yours.
Yeah, and I find it quite, it's a memory for me, a really genuinely quite moving memory, because I had this dream to be a musician, and I'd harboured that dream for so many years, and then that dream became true, and I was just living the best life, but very quickly I was getting some negativity from the media, and we heard that it was coming our way. Even my manager got a call saying the media, they've had these guys, they're specific people who won't be mentioned, Gordon Smart, and a handful of others who set about saying these negative things and really going for it. It was an orchestrated attack. And then some people joined in, some musicians. And I think it's very easy for us as musicians or people in the public eye to kind of fall for the trap when we're trying to flog our own music. When someone says, oh, and which album don't you like? Or which musician don't you like? We just fall for that. And it's too easy for us to start saying, I don't like this person or I don't like that person. We say whoever's the easiest whipping boy or girl at the time. And I happen to be that person. And so I don't know why Paul Weller said he didn't, rather eat his own shit than work with me. Maybe I'd never asked to work with him, and never. So maybe he just really wanted to eat his own shit. And Noel Gallagher saying he can't live in Ibiza because I live down the road. Well, what a sad human being is, because it's a big enough island. You don't have to. I'm not asking you to come and see me. And weirdly, house prices went through the roof the moment he left, actually. And I don't know whether the house prices went up because he had left or because I'd arrived. But there's got to be some connection. And the Damon Albarn story was bizarre. There I was on Jules Holland, and at the end of the Jules Holland show, they take a picture of all the musicians, and Damon Albarn refused to be in that photo because I was on the episode with him. And so And
he said that in front of you?
No, his management went and spoke to the producers of the show, and he's a big deal. So they went along with that, which is bizarre too, because they should have told him just not to be such a prick. And so I was then held back in my dressing room, all these different dressing rooms that all the musicians are given, and I was held back in mine while all the musicians were lined up around Jules Holland for the photo with Damon, and then he was led out to his car and off he went home, and I was brought out for the second photo, and only one of those makes the kind of the wall of Hall of Fame that they post all those pictures up. But it was very petty stuff. And so here you are, I'm a grown man at that stage. I've had a proper job in the army, and here I am suddenly in this kind of the music industry, and it seems so childish. All of this seems so childish. These guys, this is like really, it's like being back at school. And there I am at the Q Awards, and I'm up for one of the awards, and I guess the Gorillaz were up for the same award. I was lucky enough to get it, so maybe Damon was, But there, Keith Flint of The Prodigy, what a kind of, what a rock star, what a punk rock star, a guy you'd think would be the most unfriendly, and he just came up, grabbed me, put his arms around me and said, good for you, mate. I'm so thrilled for your success. And I really, it was a hug that meant a lot to me at the time. He was an amazing, gentle, kind human being.
And I'm sure that now, when you can reflect on all this stuff, you almost feel even stronger because you went there and you dealt with it. And not only did you deal with it internally, but externally, you've had the last laugh on many occasions, as we see if we follow you on social media. But I do think that not to talk about actually how it felt does a total disservice to people that might be going through the same thing, but also to try and educate those people that think that bullying is just having a laugh, or we're just having a joke, or I'm going with the crowd. Someone who changed schools for being bullied, this stuff makes my skin crawl, absolutely makes my skin crawl. So would you mind sharing for us and the audience how it really felt, like that moment you're in that dressing room on your own, what you're really thinking, and how you now feel about it?
So you want to try Huel, but you don't know where to start. Well, let's start with the fact that we all like different stuff. So Ben, behind the camera, he loves the ready-to-drinks, whereas I really enjoy the daily A to Z vitamins. Well, this is the Huel Taster Bundle, and you can try the lot with 8 ready-to-drinks, 6 A to Z daily vitamins, 8 complete nutrition bars, 2 hot savoury pots, and a free Huel t-shirt. All you have to do is click the link in the description to unlock your offer now at huel.com/high performance.
I think I felt embarrassed,
Yeah.
and marginally ashamed that I was picked out to be and chosen not to be with my peers. Is embarrassing. Is really how it is. Shameful. And so it's weird watching these things back. And we just did a documentary into what there are moments in there that you don't feel very proud. I remember with my wife, now wife, when I was on a Graham Norton show and we were watching the feedback online, watch the show and watch the feedback, and the negativity online was so big. And I'm trying to chat this girl up and then think I better not show her this negativity. Alcohol saw her through it, and she clouded her judgment.
Right.
And she is now wife. But I think also the way I've got over it is to put things in perspective. And as I say, I call that kind of a behaviour very childish. It's at school, it's a different thing. They're children, and so you can kind of children don't know any better. To be in an adult industry in them to be that way, you think, wow, how immature. But also, whilst I might have dealt with what I've had a lot of negativity, the positivity way outweighed it. Incredibly so. If I'm playing, I'm on a world tour, which lasted 2.5 years on my first. I haven't stopped touring, in fact, and I've been playing to, to 8,000 to 20,000 people every night in arenas, and you look out at these queues of people, and you can look at your phone and you can find some negative stuff, and as I say, Gordon Smart stuff in the sun. If you can find it if you want to, but if you look out the window and see them queuing, you should kind of say, hey, these people have given their time. They bought tickets. They put much more effort in. They bought tickets and they've travelled and they're queuing up. And if it's in Britain, they're queuing in the rain. So I think the negativity is far outweighed by the positivity, and I feel grateful for them.
See, but that's an interesting point, James, because there's plenty of research on this that says the brain is wired to go to the negative.
Absolutely.
So you can get 100 positive comments, but it's the one comment that is disparaging that sticks with you. So how have you learned to override that?
Well, I suppose what I've learned to do is laugh at myself for doing so. And that's why with responding to a negative tweet, that's why my response is often laughing at me as much as it is to the other person, because I'm crazy for going on there and looking for it. Yeah. It is a madness. And that's why I think something like social media, which is antisocial, our lives would be much better to put it down and speak to normal people, because face to face, we're probably kinder. Noel Gallagher's never said anything unkind to my face. He just always does it to your back when he's trying to flog music.
But this is why I think it's an important conversation to have on a show like High Performance, because it's about understanding human beings better. And I think the legacy that this leaves hopefully can educate people. I mean, there's a great line you used to the education secretary who was using ridiculing language when you said, when you're trying to help someone up, you usually send a ladder, not a bow and arrow.
Yeah, well, if you want to help people get to the top of the tree, give them a ladder, not a bow and arrow, because he was implying that to help people, to get people up to the top of the tree, we should be shooting the people who are already at the top. Yeah, and I think absolutely right in that way. And I suppose the other thing, the other mechanism I've felt, which is important, which is that, my friends and my family, the people who count. The people who I don't know out there in the world who are saying things, I've never met them necessarily or don't know them especially well, particularly on social media. You're never going to meet these people. Why would you take their opinion seriously? It's your friends and family who will look after you and support you and take the mickey out of you in the way that you deserve.
How has it changed you? Are you more empathetic, or did you not need to be any more empathetic than you already were?
Well, I've always had It did come as a surprise. We're talking a lot about negativity, and again, we should talk about the positives because because they outweigh, as I say, the negativity. It came as a surprise when it first happened. It took away the fun, but I'd come from the army where we take the mickey out of each other all the time, and so again, I learned to look at it after a while, learned to look at it as, we always take the mickey out of people we love, so I'll just treat it as people, taking the mickey out of me because it comes out of affection. And that becomes easier over time. And then what I've learned to do is, if you read something and you want to respond, don't do it with emotion. Just sit back. You'll always respond better the next day. When you've taken the sting out of something, you'll always. So I've learned to just settle down and treat it like I'm talking to my mate. So then I've learned to have fun with it and laugh at myself. Think about who's really doing this. As I say, I've got 10,000 people queuing up to a gig. Who is it who's doing this negative? They're probably a 50-year-old man still living with their parents upstairs, probably with their trousers around their ankles, writing these negative things while they're there on their own. And I'm responding to them. We're both nuts. So I need to laugh at them and laugh totally at myself for not thinking how lucky I am to be doing what I do.
So let's talk then about what you believe high performance to be, because among this sea of criticism and negativity, and it was obviously horrible, there was also the incredible success. We will talk in detail as well about your upbringing and your time spent in the British military. A real myriad of experiences and understanding human nature. So when I say to you, what is high performance? Where do you kind of find an answer to that?
Well, I think fundamentally you have to train. You have to do the practice, and it's about the 10,000 hours of experience in whatever your job is. And I've sung a ton from a little child, and people can go online and say, oh, James Blunt, he can't sing. I can sing. And my sound man will say, yeah, you don't hit I don't have a duff note because I've put that time and practice in. And we practice as a band, hours and hours and hours. And my band, till my fingers are absolutely, till they are calloused up. We put the time in, and the effort fundamentally. And then hopefully with that experience comes confidence as well. I can step on to a stage in front of thousands of people and be totally, totally relaxed because I know what I'm going to do. I put the time in before and it's going to be absolutely fine now.
But would you tell us about the early experiences before you've accumulated the hours of the practice? Because you've still got to get out there to perform before you can acquire that experience. What was that like for you?
Yeah, for me, it was an amazing experience. I was coming out of the army to go into music. So my final 2 years, I was based in London. I was the Queen's ceremonial bodyguard in London. So the guys we see outside Buckingham Palace, but I was riding on a horse with a helmet and an armour and a sword and a helmet with a plume. And I'm riding around beside Her Majesty on those large parades or on a daily basis going to Horse Guards, it's called, beside Downing Street. And then in the evening, I was off to North London in these tiny bars and clubs, and playing tiny gigs in front of 50 people one day, or 5 of my mates on the others if they're the only ones who've turned up, and all of that is worth the hard graft because again it gives you a certain resilience as well. The people who've been on X Factor, for instance, they have to make their mistakes in front of the nation, and I'm not saying anything derogatory against them. I've been an X Factor judge in Australia, and I feel great terror for what they are going through because for the benefit of the judges, I was paid well, and the producers who get their ratings and get their jobs. These people with dreams were making their mistakes in front of a nation, whereas I was in tiny, tiny bars and clubs, playing to very few people, making my mistakes then, and I made many mistakes in those performances. But you learn what works and what doesn't. And my stage presence, my stage craft has been really grafted. And this next year I'm playing in the O2 in London or Manchester Arena, and I'm going to stand up in front of 15,000 people. And I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be very at ease with it. I'm going to have great, great fun, and that will be infectious to an audience because I've just put in the time, and I know what works. I live in Ibiza, and I've stolen some stuff from Carl Cox. Right. I know what he does when he's doing, with a bunch of people, and I've watched Elton perform, and I know, I've nicked a couple of things from him, and so you just the time.
You do that, do you? You watch others.
Yeah, absolutely, and you just okay, that works, and that doesn't. I'll have that, or I've made this mistake once, and I corrected it the right way one day, and I'll use that, and I made a mistake the other day, so I won't do that. Experience counts for a lot.
Can you give us an insight as to what those mistakes were? Like, what were the common mistakes that lots of performers make in those early years?
Well, there's some really obvious things. There are phrases, aren't there? Never complain, never explain. If I have an issue on stage, you won't know it. I won't tell anyone. If you're struggling with a bit of sound, my audience won't know. I won't tell them. If I've made a fluff up in a song, my band will remind me, sure, after the show. But they'll carry me through during that moment. We push on. We don't stop. The show goes on. We don't, and because the audience won't know, and they'll feel an inflection, but it'll make it live. They'll enjoy it more.
That reminds us, we were lucky enough to interview Gary Barlow, who spoke about his 10,000 hours came playing the keyboard for performers. So he was getting to watch an audience from behind a performer to understand how you take people on a journey, how you bring them with you. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I have a great, that's going on a journey. I really believe in as a performance. I stand on a stage and I sort of, in a terrible way, remove my clothing. It's not that impressive, but worth a look.
Yeah. We'll find that on YouTube, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You sort of remove your shell, everything that all your inhibitions, and you just take people on an emotional journey. And it's a funny thing doing as a musician, as a singer-songwriter. There are musicians in my kind of line of music are often, mocked and saying, "Oh, you're sort of sensitive and over emotional." But music should be, shouldn't it? It should have emotion in it, and so to remove your inhibitions, to stand there and be judged takes a certain courage, and to take people on an emotional journey is what I do, because I have, as you know, some pretty miserable songs. And so we take them down and then we take them up, and that's what makes the concert really, it gives it, its journey.
Can we speak about emotions then? Because I think this is a really interesting almost dichotomy that I see in your story, that on the documentary that you mentioned earlier, you speak about your experience of going to boarding school, and I think you tell the camera, I fucking hated it. And yet you've experienced things in war where you've seen some pretty horrific acts from other human beings to another. And you talk about how you learned to express emotions through song rather than necessarily being able to talk about it freely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I was sent to boarding school age 7. That removes any emotion from you pretty early on, It's beaten out of you by a headmaster with a cane. And
honestly?
Not
far off.
A couple of times.
Yeah.
And so my mum would definitely describe me as emotionally stunted. And I'm very close to my parents, but we have never discussed how we feel about anything. Then I find the word even feelings quite tricky, really? Because it's sort of, it starts to go in an embarrassing thing. It's, yeah. So it's
amazing how awkward you get talking about emotion when, like, if I was to say what the song that's moved me the most in the past few years, the song about your dad, about Monster.
Yeah.
I mean, if I played that in the car the other day and I was with someone else and both of us are crying, right?
Yeah.
Yet the man who writes it and sings it and can go to that place doesn't even want to use the word feeling.
Yeah.
On a podcast. That's hard for me to compute.
Isn't it? And I suppose that's, as you were saying, that's how I've just found my emotional outlet. If you can ask me things about how I feel, particularly, I feel I'm slightly embarrassed to talk about it and rather just say something silly. But in a song, I can do it. I can really feel that. I can summon it up, and I can sum up how I want to, what are the things I want to say to my father that I've never said. And so when I'd written that song and recorded that song, I then said to my father, I call him Daddy, hey Daddy, because posh people call their parents Daddy. And I, say, hey Daddy, I've written a song and I think you should hear it. Yeah. And I took him upstairs, put some headphones on, he tapped his foot out of time. And then he put his hand on my knee and said, jolly good, well done. And that was that. That's all we did.
Yeah. And how did that feel?
Well, I was relieved that I felt he had, understood the song. There was a warmth.
Is it almost enough for you to know that he heard it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew it meant something to him. Absolutely. And, it's a tough listen. I say, I'm not your son, you're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive, no need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And, it
gets me even hearing that bit. It's like...
It's very direct, definitely. But I think he got it.
And how do you feel thinking about those lyrics?
I feel very, very lucky to be able to say those words to him while he was still alive, because often we leave things too late, I think. And then for me, I had the magic that the record label would give me the money to make a video and that I could get him in it. And it was very funny recording because he was, while we were there, camera going, song playing, me crying, camera crews all crying, so many people, and he was just going, I'm still alive. What on earth are you all blubbing about? But I captured him on camera, and I'll always have him on camera in that way, which is a gift.
Are you familiar with a concept that psychologists talk about, as they call it boarding school syndrome, where they talk about the ABCD of it, where many young people that go away to boarding school at a young age, at a later stage, identify that there's feelings of abandonment, betrayal, captivity, or disassociation from emotions that they will have experienced.
Yeah. And so it's a strange thing because I don't see it as necessarily too bad a thing. Of course, it strips you of emotion. And I found my own outlet for that. Other than that small thing, is that a problem? And it does come with some pros.
And I was going to ask you about those.
Some pros. And I prep school is from 7 till 14. I quite enjoyed that to a degree because you know what, you're young, you're chucked in with a whole load of other kids. There are some amazing facilities, football pitches and rugby pitches and a ton of different sports and things like that. And we're lucky, and you've got kids your age to mess around with, and who wants to be with your parents? That's kind of good. Then you get to 14 to 18, and I didn't really enjoy that so much. But that's the age. These are all boys' schools. It would have been nice to see a few girls at that stage. Would have been kind of nice. And I was in a year that wasn't particularly pleasant, and so at that stage I really didn't enjoy it. But there are pros to that. You become very independent very early on. I always joke about, my parents dropped me off at school when I was 7 and they didn't call me again until I got famous, which isn't true, and they're very close, but I sort of, what I mean is I'm a very independent person. I travel a lot and very comfortable, moving around, and you know what? I suppose its greatest benefit is those kind of institutions. The lesson they tell you from the beginning is you can be whatever you want to be. They'll say, these people were at this school before. I've just gone back to my old school, and they're going on the boards. There's Churchill, and there's Robert Peel, who invented the police force and was a prime minister, and a ton of other people who've been at the kind of the very top of our nation. And you're told you can be this too, and just knowing that giving any child that confidence you can be anything is a massive, massive benefit. And I started saying from 14, I'm going to be a professional musician, and I had this complete naive confidence. And talking about the other people I know in the industry, Ed Sheeran is a very, very confident human being, and quite rightly so, because he's a very talented musician. He has an insane confidence. Me, I look at myself and compare it at the time, and mine was a complete naivety, a naive confidence that I will be a professional musician. That when I recorded that first album, Back to Bedlam, everyone's going to buy it. I really knew that this will be heard. And if I'd known what I know now, it would have really taken the wind out of my sails, potentially. When I got to Los Angeles and thousands of people are looking for a record deal, and everyone wants to be famous and everyone wants to achieve, and everyone's got the same goal as you. Had I realized how kind of mad the ambition was, it would have stifled it.
But before we jump into that LA period of your life when things did start to take off and this dream you had started to manifest itself, I'd like to just go back to when you learned to write and to be able to express those emotions through music. How did that come about, and how did it make you feel?
I had learnt the violin at a very early age because my mum made me learn the violin. It was really just, she made me play, it was with a teacher, hot cross buns with some other children. You've read about this. We played hot cross buns round a circular table going in an anti-clockwise direction, and I think we were probably involved in some kind of satanic ritual. But it was the 70s and that was all good then. And then I learned the piano when I was about 7, and that was miserable. Learning Mozart's Sonata in F-sharp minor is not a song you want to play to your mates. So I didn't enjoy that very much. But then at school, age 14, there was this guy playing the electric guitar, and that was exciting. And he was playing songs that I knew from the radio, and immediately I picked that up. He showed me the same 3 chords that I still know and love. And with that, immediately that I was playing an instrument that I loved and playing other songs that I heard from the radio, I started having my own little musical ideas. And that was just suddenly a realization that with those ideas comes words that I would like to say that I wouldn't normally say with my friends. Having musical ideas immediately go to, your own thoughts, your own ideas, and your own expression. And I suppose also that's the age, isn't it, that of 14 onwards, where you start to realize yourself as an individual. You're not your parent's child anymore, mothered or fathered by them. You're suddenly becoming an individual with your own thoughts. And so perhaps the timing of that is when I started writing songs and expressing myself.
What are the lyrics if any, that you remember from that period that you were able to kind of express how you felt through the music, even if you weren't able to say it?
I wrote a song called Wise Men. It's on my first album. I won't be able to tell you the lyrics off by heart. But that was one of my first songs. And it was really written about the pressure to conform or to be like other people or the stresses of being judged by others. That's kind of, looking back at the lyrics, they kind of make no sense to me, but I know the feeling is about the wanting to, not be being judged by others and doing your own thing.
But this idea of not wanting to conform and to follow the pack, then, I'm interested in what was your decision making to then go into the military, which is all about conformity and sticking together.
Yeah, and I don't mean conform in that, in the way of I mean, following the crowd. I wouldn't want to conform with that, but conform with what is right. I'm a believer in doing the right thing, and so the army, sure, there's the notion that we are doing something and we're working together as a team, which is different necessarily. You follow rules. And I suppose instructions, don't you? That you're given orders. But the army is also about, we have a free will to do that. We're given missions, and how you achieve that mission is up to you. And so we work as teams together. We're all experts in our field. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the army. Each person within my troop of soldiers to come from all walks of life, all corners of the UK, all professionals in their specific job within the troop, and all of us working to help achieve a certain goal, and there's real magic in that.
But there's a story in your book that you recount where you defied orders when you were in Bosnia.
Yeah.
Which, again, is that interesting dichotomy of following the path, doing what you consider to be the right thing, but being willing to walk away and do what you consider to be right. Yeah,
well, to follow orders is to try and all work as a team to achieve a goal. But then we still have the moral obligation to do the right thing. And that's why I suppose some soldiers have been tried further down the line. They're saying, it's just following orders. Well, depending on which army you are in, I don't know if that's a good enough defense. We should be able to say to our commanders, that's illegal, that's wrong.
And so what do you tell us about that incident, though, for our viewers?
And so mine was in...
Today's show is in partnership with BetterHelp. And look, I know that sometimes we love that thought that we can do it alone, right? We've got the strength to cope with this. But the truth is that I think all of us need support in our lives. And I come at this from a very personal perspective. When I was in my 20s, I really struggled with my mental health. And you know what? It took me almost 2 years to finally reach out and have therapy. The moment I did, everything changed. And that's why I passionately implore you, if you're thinking about it, have therapy. It was a game changer for me. It could be a game changer for you. And I love partnering with BetterHelp because they make therapy flexible, affordable, convenient, and you can start the process in just minutes. And I'm really pleased to say that thanks to this show, you can get 10% off. All you need to do is go to betterhelp.com/performance for 10% off. That's betterhelp.com/performance for 10% off. Good luck.
So mine was in Kosovo in 1999, and it was a weapons amnesty. We were taking weapons. We do a really sensible thing. If people are killing each other, rather than taking sides necessarily, we just try and bring peace by standing in the middle, stopping them all killing each other. And then at that stage, let's take the weapons away. The American army believe in this, even if they'll still leave weapons in their own country. They believe in somewhere like the Balkans. Let's get the weapons out. If they can't shoot each other, they'll hit each other, and these people will live. So a weapons amnesty, and so I had an area of responsibility, and I was trying to remove weapons from people, and I was authorized to be quite forceful, and so I would get groups of people together and say, I'm removing your weapons from you, and if you do this, I will be your security. But if you don't, then I will effectively be, your enemy. And this obviously means a lot to the people. These people, they're civilians who've got weapons in their houses for their own protection. This is a Serb area as well, and they're really worried. Now that the Serb army has been pushed out, they're really worried that the Albanians who the Serb army had been killing, the Albanians would come in and seek revenge and retribution to these Serb villagers. So they need their weapons for protection. But I was saying, you don't. We're here. And I was really authorized to say, and we won't leave you. We will stick by you. And you give us your weapons, and I give you my word. I will be here for the long term and protect you. And, we have grown men in tears working out whether they believe you or not, whether they can trust this young, 23 years old or something. And I meant it. I would be there. And we took all their weapons. They lined up and they gave us all their weapons, all their security. We gave them. And the next day, my boss called up and said, right, we've got the weapons. Let's go. We're going somewhere else. And I turned to my soldiers and I said, I gave them my word. I gave them my word. And my soldiers said, you absolutely did. What can we do? And I said, well, okay. For the first time in my life, as an officer with my soldiers, we took a vote, because it's not a democratic place normally. But we took a vote. I said, what I'm going to do is, I think half of us go up, including me, because I'm the one on the radio to our boss. We'll go up to the border where we've been sent on this new mission, but we're going to leave half of us here to carry out this job of securing and making safe this village where they no longer have their weapons because of us. And my soldiers said, we're in. Absolutely, we're in. So we split up, and for 2 weeks, we did these two separate jobs, which we didn't have enough manpower for either job. We had no sleep in that time. We were absolutely broken in that period, but it was we felt we were doing the right thing. A few miles away in another area of responsibility where the same thing had happened, where the weapons had been removed, nothing to do with me, but an entire village was murdered. And my boss called me and said, this has happened in another area. You need to get back to that village those villages where you'd taken their weapons. And I said, you know what, screw you. We've been there for 2 weeks because you gave me, I gave them my word, and you gave me your word that I could say this. And we've been there this 2 weeks. So I think in the army, particularly in small armies like the British Army, you still can know what's right and wrong, and you can still use your judgment.
Can we talk about imposter syndrome? But I'm really intrigued by this 23-year-old pitched into this world where he's having to make not just decisions, but life and death decisions. He's having to lead other people, and people are looking to him for that leadership. So what in that period did you learn about how you as an individual make decisions?
Well, I think at that time it was a real belief in doing either the right thing or the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And in that I feel fortunate in many ways. I was in the right war. Kosovo was us getting in the middle of two peoples who were killing each other. And to get in the middle is absolutely the right thing. Nowadays, people don't seem to stop things. When they see someone being robbed, they don't seem to get involved anymore, do they? They seem to just get out their cameras and film it for social media. Yeah. And the right thing would be to get in the middle and say, hey, for humanity's sake, let's not do that.
Was it a thing for you, imposter syndrome, at that point in your life?
Not at that stage, no. I felt very comfortable in my job. As I say, I'm supported by a very trustworthy team, and I respect them hugely. It's a weird thing in the army. As an officer, you're called sir, but you really need to look at that by guys who've been in longer than you. To hold that respect, you really need to look at them and appreciate that it's them who are getting you through these things, advising you through these things, and so to respect them in that way means that you're supported fully.
Yeah.
And so I felt very comfortable with where I was because of them.
Great.
So what would you say the top three lessons you learned from leading a group of people in such difficult, dangerous circumstances that you feel our viewers could take away and apply in their own?
Yeah, well, it's about having a good team, and therefore equipping yourself with good support. It's respect for that team, and then having been well informed, then it's having the conviction to make a decision and going in that direction with that conviction.
So it sounds to me like, when you're describing that from a military point of view, that again, watching the documentary, you've got the same band members from 20 years ago when you first did Back to Bedlam, still working with you today. How many of those lessons are applied from the military into your own band unit?
Absolutely. It's the same game. Just my tank has grown a little. It's now a tour bus. Yeah, I have had the same crew for 20 years, really. I have almost the same band. I just lost two of them because they married girls from Australia. But otherwise, it's the same band, the same crew. And so we have a great sense of loyalty to each other. And I see them in the same way. You know, they're experts in their field. My guitarist, he plays guitar better than me. I better ask his opinion and his advice. And then, you know, and if the bass player says he's got to follow the drummer all the time, well, 9 times out of 10, I'll say he's probably right. But the one time out of 10 where I say, you know, sorry, but I just want to do it my way, he'll shrug and, you know, think I'm an idiot. But he'll say, come on, then let's try it your way, James.
But then, can I explore that idea that you went through Sandhurst, where the motto is you lead to serve, or you serve to lead?
Yeah, one of those two.
Yeah. But then I'm interested that in that same mentality with a band member, when it's still your name above the door at the end of the day, when those 10,000 people you look out of the window are queuing to see James Blunt. So how do you keep that humility to be able to listen to them without getting high on your own supply?
Well, because, you know, they're really, really amazing musicians. They're the rock stars. I always say out loud, they're the rock stars that I always wanted to be. You know, the drummer plays the drums way better than me. He'd be laughing if I was even saying this. I don't play the drums. You know, he's employed to be the best drummer in the world, or, you know, that I can possibly afford. So he can advise me on that. He plays it really, really well. These are phenomenal musicians. I've got really great crew members for that reason, and therefore I can respect them. And so we also do a very basic thing on my tour. I have a dressing room. We're all in the same dressing room together. No one knocks on the door to come in. You know, there's one member of the crew who always knocks on the door, and I always say, please don't knock on the door. Please just walk in.
Why does that matter so much?
Because his name's Jerry, and I love him. Jerry... And he's, you know, he's a sweetheart. I don't want to knock. Just come on in. It's our dressing room, and they all come in at the end of the show. Crew included, band included. We all have a drink. The lighting guy, Glenn, will take the Mickey out of where I cocked up then and there and that thing, and we'll take the Mickey out of him for when, you know, when everyone was in darkness. And we live and breathe together as a little family. I'm the lucky one who has my name on the ticket, but we live as a family and look after each other.
And what does that do for you as a band?
Well, it means that we're going to care for each other. And if I'm struggling with things, you know, if I'm struggling, we talked about the negativity, and when I was going through harder times, and there were some, you know, you get a tabloid newspaper writing some terrible things about you. Well, then, you know, your bandmates will come and put their arm around you and say, you know, well, you know, at least she said you were good in the sack, mate. Even if, you know, if the kiss and tell was painful to read. From the Sun newspaper.
Yeah,
you
lovely.
know, we look after each other.
Did I read a story that girls were being paid to sleep, like they were paying girls to try and sleep with famous men?
There was an amazing moment a few years ago where the police sent all the internal emails from the News of the World to my parents. And in that process, we found that they had 2 girls on the payroll who were sent out to go and shag different celebrities: Shane Warne, Ria Ferdinand, John Terry, and me. And I was last out of those guys. So and yeah, that's a pretty amazing thing to read.
How did that make you feel?
Well, bizarre. I mean, I think actually, again, some kind of shame in it, because actually the story of those girls, you know, 2 of them, it's a pretty good story in many ways. 2 girls fall down bed. And then what was weird is reading the internal emails. Andy Coulson, the then editor of the News of the World, was writing to the journalists back and forth to portray how best to portray my orgasm. Was the internal dialogue in a national newspaper. Wow. I think he'd sing her name. Oh, Emma. He'd sing it. And you think, you know, you're the editor of a national newspaper. And that's what that's the level that you're sinking to. And then shame because, you know, these emails are being read by my mother while I'm away on tour. And it's, again, just kind of shame that you've got yourself in this ugly situation.
But we spoke to Paul Gascoigne, who attributed some of his own mental health challenges down to experiences like what you've described.
Now, and he's had it tough.
So I'm interested in, how did you avoid getting into that spiral of despair, shame, negativity, lack of trust, that allowed you to look at it from a perspective and laugh in a healthier way?
Yeah, I was I got into the business a bit older than most people because I'd been in the army. So I was 28 when I first got in. I did lie about my age on my Wikipedia page. Took off 5 years, but being older gave me at least a little, a little bit of worldly experience, I suppose, to a level. And I have a very close family who at least can just look after me in that way. I think those things genuinely help.
So tell us, I mean, if you don't mind then, tell us a little bit about the advice, the support, the help that your family gave you that, again, people can understand.
Well, you know what, it's just simply to have, your mum and your dad call you and say, hey, the world, it may look like the world hates you, but we love you. That counts for a lot. And it's funny, I watched the Amy Winehouse biopic the other day, and I felt so sad at the end of it because you saw someone who was very, very young when she started out with these dreams, and and again similarly, pursued by paparazzi outside her house, and the struggle that she had, and she had it in many different ways, and it did bring back a lot of memories for me. But I feel the fundamental thing is I was guided and advised well. I know she on tour didn't have the same setup of the dressing room where the band and the crew could come in. She had a security guard outside stopping people coming in. My lighting guy who worked with her didn't go in, wasn't allowed in, and didn't speak to her during that time. And as I say, my family were very warm during that time. I can't say I knew anything about her family or compare it, but at least I know that in my case, my family were always there.
I think in so many ways, when it finally happened for you, the fact that there was tough times at school, the fact that you'd been through the British Army, the fact that you'd been to boarding school, I think so many of these things were almost building a suit of armour that you didn't know was being built necessarily, but was probably pretty useful when finally the world
you're
knew
absolutely
you.
Right. And I think, as I say, I was 28 going into the business. I've come from the army. I can put things in perspective. And I often did. If I call a mate in the army and say, the news of the world said a nasty thing about me, and he'd go, oh, well, here I am in Afghanistan, and so-and-so's leg's just been blown off today. Back in my box.
Yeah.
It kind of puts it back in perspective.
Yeah.
Let's talk then about the transition from the army to the music world. I saw one time you described yourself as an accidental pop star, but it doesn't feel accidental at all. You dreamed of it at 14. You were putting in the graft when you were still serving in the army. So how is anything here accidental? This is hard work.
Yeah, well, I think what people are saying that I'm perhaps an unnatural pop star. Not the pop star feels uncomfortable because I'm not a star. I'm a musician. I'm a touring musician. That's what I am, and there's nothing starry necessarily about me. But I suppose the music business is a shallow place, and it deals in its marketing place, really marketing a dream and an ambition, and so a lot of it is about what's hip and cool, and those two words are not associated with me in any way. And for me, that's why I don't feel necessarily very comfortable in the business. But I have a different job. I'm not in the music business. I'm a touring musician, and I get out there and I tour the world, and I graft really hard, and I write songs that aren't about what's hip and what's cool. I write about real things that I really feel that I have experienced myself. And most people in the world aren't really that bothered with what's cool, are they? Most people are dealing with real things too, real issues, and I think that's hopefully why I'm still very lucky to have an audience, is because my audience at least, connect with the songs because they hear a little bit of themselves in what I'm singing about.
So we're having this conversation 20 years after Back to Bedlam was released, right? Let's rewind then 20 years. So you've left the army. How did you go from leaving the army to suddenly having an album that pretty much everyone in this room and everyone listening to this has somewhere in their collection, back in the day when we still used to buy CDs?
Well, a manager. I got a manager. He happened to be Elton John's junior manager. He his day-to-day manager. And I'd been playing all these gigs around London and getting record labels down, which is the wrong thing to do, because you only get one shot with a record label, and if they've seen you and that things aren't all in place, then they pass, and they're not going to come back a second time. And so for this kind of podcast of high performance, it's about keeping your powder dry until you really are fully equipped to going in and fighting the good fight with everyone you need around you. And I went in too early with record labels, and I didn't have my manager, and I didn't have the songs. I got that manager eventually. I've got the right manager. He's still my manager today.
And how was the rejection early on for you?
Well, I was there are a lot of record labels, and you think I'll find another one,
Yeah.
and it's a learning experience. So many wrong turns, so many dead ends, but they weren't. That just wasn't the path. And I had this blind conviction that I'll get there in the end. And so my manager says, okay, he's now the guy who can at least help me with the industry and help me with the shark-infested waters that the industry have, and then he can let me focus on my job as writing songs. And then I went out to the South by Southwest Music Festival, having burnt my bridges with every UK label, and it's, and almost what I didn't realise at the time, this was probably the last ditch effort. I didn't know that. My manager really says, it's a kind of last shot. But I played on the 20th floor of a Ramada hotel to an audience of about 20 people on the fringes of this festival, which I was hoping to be in the thick of it, but I was right out there on the kind of edge of the town. And one woman walked up to me afterwards at the end, and she said, "Hey, my name's Linda Perry. I'll give you the money to make an album today or tomorrow if you sign on this piece of paper for the record deal today." And I went, hell yeah, come on, let's do it. Custard Records, wow. I signed to. She's, as I say, from Four Non Blondes, wrote that song, Hey Yeah, What's Going On? It's her hit. And that, and with that, the dream came true.
Wow. What was it like then when fame came your way?
Well, that was still a bit further down the way. We still had to go and make that album. But then, some bizarre things started happening to me. I found myself living with Carrie Fisher. That's a bizarre experience. I just bumped into.
How do you find yourself living with Carrie Fisher? I mean, that's.
I had a girlfriend at the time whose family knew some interesting people, and I found myself in Notting Hill in a restaurant on a Sunday lunch, and the person sitting next to me was Carrie Fisher. Her first question to me was, "What do you do?" I said, "I've just left the army, and I'm a musician now, and I've got a record deal." "Oh, right, where?" And I said, "I'm moving to Los Angeles to record my first album." "Where are you going to live?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "I haven't got a place." And she said, "Well, you're going to live with me then." And she put me up in her house in cabin number 2. Beside that, cabin number 1 was a guy called Charlie Wessler, who just produced a film called Dumb and Dumber, and there's something about Mary. And I lived with her, and her mum, Carrie's mum, was Debbie Reynolds from Singing in the Rain. So in this just kind of crazy house, and I'm going down Mulholland Drive every day to work with the producer who I'd found. That was really weird how I'd found him too. I'd heard this music by a guy called Elliott Smith. It was just so beautiful, and I called my manager and said I'd love to work with the guy who recorded this music. And so he called that producer, a guy called Tom Rothrock, and he'd done, as I say, Beck, Elliott Smith, Badly Drawn Boy, the Foo Fighters, a whole host of incredible music. And the very day before that phone call, my song You're Beautiful from the South by Southwest Festival had literally come through his inbox, and he'd been sent that by a random person, listened to that and thought, wow, this is really exciting. And we'd called him the next day. So
do you believe in fate or luck?
Well, I think, luck is your own creation, isn't it? Yeah. Luck, you don't have to be in the right place at the right time. You have to kind of be in all the places all the time for it to find you. You create your own luck. And then from there, fate will be yours. And so, yeah, there I am. I mean, living in LA, we're at Carrie Fisher's house, recording down the road in the amazing studio with Tom Rothrock. And at that stage, well, there, my naive confidence is really going, I've got everything. This is going to work. Everyone's going to enjoy this. Everyone's going to buy this or hear this album, because how can it not? I was very, very lucky to have a few doors were open for me in that way.
And it was called Back to Bedlam from the time spent in that house, right?
Yes. Well, I was searching for a title, and the song's really about the questions that your own personal inner questions you have as a young person, stepping out into the world, not knowing who you're going to be, who you're going to meet, what you're going to do in life. What does life have, and what does it hold for you? You have, all the questions of what life is going to bring. Is what that album was about, very much in the internal questions. And then living with Carrie, and her house is a kind of mad house, and she has a madness in her own head. She's actually just really bright, but most people think she's kind of slightly mad, because she's just, if you just know that the conversation is going to go from A to F, you might as well just skip straight from A to F rather than explaining the process. And most people would then get lost and think she was a bit crazy, but she was just thinking faster than others. And so her house was a bit of bedlam. And so the album seemed to, Back to Bedlam rang true.
And I read, and I don't know if it's a true anecdote, you can correct me if it's not, that when you recorded Goodbye My Lover in the bathroom, you were chipping on hash brownies at the time.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It's true.
So
I really wrote it in a book in the hope that I would never have to discuss it in real life. Yeah, well, in recording, sometimes it's interesting to try and get deep in on a song, and I'd been told that hash brownies might be a way of doing this. I hadn't experimented with this kind of thing before, obviously, and so I thought, we're in California. These things are easily come by, and so I bought a hash brownie, and I was told by the nice person who sold it to me, gave it to me, take a quarter of this and you'll be away. And I told Tom Rothrock, the producer, we should do this, and you're my producer, so you should be in on this. By the way, all of this is an exaggeration, a lie, just in case I need to go on an American visa again. So
for clarity,
I'm just saying this is I'm bragging and making up this story as
it's embellishment.
An embellishment of a story to try and be popular with you two.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're in a bar, and I'm just telling you a story to make you like me. And so I said to my producer, I'll do half and you do half, and he said, you do it and I'll see how you feel, and then maybe I'll make a decision from there. So I took it, and 45 minutes later, I wanted to tear my own fucking skin off. I was in physical and mental agony. I wanted out on planet Earth, the world, my life. I was just tearing myself apart. And he walked in and said, how are you doing? And I said, it's quite mild. So he took this. We were then driven round to Carrie's house, where there was a piano in the bathroom because we didn't have a piano in the studio. And he started screaming, take me to fucking hospital, man. Take me to fucking hospital. And I found if I played the piano, he would calm down. He was sitting in a chair. He's got a cowboy hat and a long hair. He looks like an American Jesus, big cowboy boots on. And he would just calm down for a moment. The engineer pressing record on the computers, and he'd calm down while I played. And then when I stopped, he'd go back in, take me to fucking hospital, man. Take me to hospital. And then so we did the piano bit, and then I did the vocal too. We get quick to the microphone. I'll do the vocal to keep him calm. Any music, just to calm him down. And I start singing this song. It's Goodbye My Lover. And here I am. I've had this dream since I was 14. I've left the army to follow this dream. I'm now living in America. I'm living with Carrie Fisher. I'm in her bathroom, and it's about the song's about the girl, and she's out there somewhere. And I suddenly realized in this moment of clarity, I'm going to sing this song, and I'm recording it, and I'm going to get to the end, and I'm going to die. And I get to the end of the song, and I completely blacked out. I passed out. I smacked the floor unconscious. And then Tom stands up to us, take me to fucking hospital, man. And the engineer stood up and said, what the fuck is wrong with you people? And he left. And anyway, Carrie banged on the door, opened some soup, opened the door, carried in some soup rather, and fed us. And we calmed down with Carrie feeding us. And actually, if you listen to the recording, that's one take on the vocal. You didn't get any more out of me, and you can hear this kind of expiration at the end, and it's that's what made it onto the record.
Tell us a bit about Carrie as well, because I was listening to the story. I know how much you loved her and the high regard you hold her in, and I kind of wonder whether any of this would have happened if you hadn't been in Bedlam at that time. The album came from that Bedlam, right? Yeah,
I mean, I'd written those songs, but did she have an influence on it? Absolutely. I mean, also just to be so fortunate to be coming back to this house, to be in my little room, to stay up on my own, but with such, I have to, it's so hard to fully describe the house. It's an extension of her brain. She was such a creative human being, and with so many books that she had written, Postcards from the Edge, which is a movie as well, a ton of others. And her house, she had chandeliers in the trees in her garden. She had a Christmas tree set up 365 days a year. The piano, which played itself in her bathroom, in the bathroom. Another one, which Paul Simon had given her when he was married to her, which I wrote, as I say, half my album on the piano that Paul Simon. With a kind of fishbowl on it, with glass fishbowl with a glass fish in it, which I've still got. There was a Prozac pill, about a foot long, with Prozac, 5 milligrams of Prozac, and my album has got the same pill, which I photographed, changed it to 5 milligrams of James Blunt, and that's what's on my discs of subsequent albums after my first as well. And it's the pill, ceramic pill that she's buried in. They drilled a hole, they put her ashes in it, that's what she's buried in. And there's only one other copy of that pill in the world, and I've got it. And so all these little trinkets and things are an extension of her mind. Well, other things, there's Life magazine just on the side, on the counter there, of her and her mum meeting Richard Nixon. So everywhere you look, there's just a kind of, the things that will trigger your mind and make you think creatively. And so to be there recording back to Bedlam was just I did other albums there too. It's just an incredibly creative place to be.
And what was the biggest thing that you learned from her?
Well, I think openness and not to be afraid of how other people think of you, to be yourself, to not be afraid of your fragility and your failings and your frailty too. People talk about Carrie Fisher as this incredibly strong woman, and she was. She is an inspiration to many people who have struggled with being manic depressive or bipolar, with drug addiction. She spoke openly about that, and many people see that as a great strength on her part. But she also was very, very fragile and delicate, and she wasn't afraid to show those moments. That's and I kind of not in the same way that I admire her for, but in my lesser way, I have stood on a stage and exposed my fragility and my failings and my fears as a musician, and there's a courage that she did with that, and that's what I learned from her.
And have you learned to be compassionate with yourself regarding the details of her death, with the fact you were with her just the day before she died? And I know that you carry some pain from that. Have you learned to process that?
Well, I think anyone who's lost someone to something, she didn't look after herself. She was under a lot of pressure because of she was back in Star Wars, and so because of that pressure, she was starting to not care for her. She was under pressure to lose weight specifically, and she had a great phrase that men are allowed to grow old, and women are not. And she's right about that. And we know she was under this pressure to look a particular way, and as a result, and she's supposed to be on a lot of medication for being bipolar, she was starting to shift and change with that medication, but abuse other drugs too, and ultimately that's what killed her. But being around her while she's doing that and being part of that with her while she's doing that, then of course you're going to feel some guilt, thinking, what could I have contributed to this, or should I have gotten myself involved? And there are others, Charlie Wessler, who lived in cabin number 1 during that time, would confront her about that abuse, and he was sort of ostracized at that time, and that was the right thing for him to do. And I can feel some guilt for not necessarily doing as much. Not confronting her as much, perhaps. Yeah. But also what's wrong about that is that people who are in that world of struggle, strife, depression, addiction, you can't always help them. Sometimes they have to go down their own path and find their own way out of it. And so yeah, sometimes it's not your fault always.
Yeah.
We're talking about the 20th anniversary of your album. And I'm reminded of that anecdote that's often attributed to Don McLean, where someone asked him what American Pie meant to him, and he said, it means I never have to work again. And I'm interested in, when you go on stage and you're playing songs from 20 years ago, how do you keep it fresh so that vulnerability, that honesty, that emotional exposure that made it so powerful when it first came out there is still retained?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. First and foremost, the audience have paid good money to be there, and I need to really make sure I put the effort in. I think I'm grateful to the audience, and so I'm going to put 100% in, because that's what they deserve. And then for an emotional song, well, I take myself back to where it came from, and I'm back in that moment. I sing a song for Carrie, and I live and breathe the moment that I wrote it, thinking about her at that time. It's to go back to that moment, the spark. And if it's getting a little tough, then try and relate to something new that's gone on. But I have loads of songs for my wife, and when she's there, she'll be out in the audience somewhere, but there's one or two songs that she will always come on the side of the stage.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because it's our song. You know, she knows. She comes and has a little dance, and we, you know, those things. It just means something, and it just gives you a little spark for that moment.
Which songs are they?
Not telling you.
How nice though is that for you? Just to, I think of all the things you've achieved, to look to the side of the stage and see someone that has given you everything that she's given you. That
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the most obvious one that she does is a song called Postcards, and it's a really, really sweet little song about writing on a postcard, "I love you," and sending it to her, but not minding who reads it on its journey to reach her. And yeah, so it's a sweet little message.
You've got a very strange ability to connect people with their emotions, don't you think? Like when you just say these things, it sort of gets me. Like,
sweet. Well, that's my job.
you're very good at it.
Can I ask about, because people associate you with You're Beautiful and this album from 20 years ago, but I also think it takes real courage to be able to keep writing and keep innovating, knowing that some of it will hit, but some of it will miss.
Yeah.
How do you go through that mental process then of still innovating and still writing stuff, knowing that it won't necessarily be as big as those original songs?
Yeah, well, you know, I've got a record deal, and so I'm signed, so I have to. And the record label called me up and said, "James, it's time for another album." So yeah, but also, I mean, you know, I love music. It's a joy. What a great job I have, and I still have, so, you know, I'm alive. And while you're alive, you go through different experiences. And while those different experiences will give inspiration, and some of it desperately strong, that I will absolutely have to write about. We talked about the song Monsters. You know, my dad's not going to be with me for too long. And that will, like all of us understand, that's going to be a big deal in our lives when our parents, first potentially father, probably mother second, that's going to hit hard. And those things for me are to come. I have kids, and suddenly, you know, I don't matter anymore. My kids are everything. We as parents lose sleep over the way the things we said to our children, or the things our children are struggling with. We lose sleep over in a way that we haven't necessarily lost sleep over many things, you know, for many years. Suddenly we're struggling with just, are our kids going to be okay in life? And that's huge inspiration. And also, you know, I used to write the questions of a young man with a dream, and now, you know, now I write about this incredible person who's in my life, as a woman who you know, who's given me so much. So I can't write about, I'm not allowed to, or not inspired to write a song about passing someone on a subway saying, "Hey, you're beautiful." The song I have now is, you know, all the search and all the questions in life, it's you. You know, so the last song I wrote was saying all the love that I ever needed, I got it from you. You know, it's, I have, there's a muse who, is something bigger than the first album.
And when you write, do you have an eye on the commercial success of it, or is it literally just the process of writing because you love the music?
I'd be lying if I said no, wouldn't I?
Well, I'm interested as to what comes first and how you manage those demands.
Here's the thing, is that Ed Sheeran still has the belief that his next album will hit as big as the last. And when you ask me, my reply now is, I know my next album won't be as big as my first. And as a result of saying that, it won't be. And because my naive confidence that I had, I don't have anymore. And so I won't quite get it there. I won't sing it quite as well as I need to make it be the biggest album of the decade. So maintaining that naive confidence is something that I haven't managed to do. I'll go out there and I'll write some songs, and I'll, you know, and I know I can touch hearts. But yeah, Ed Sheeran's got a little bit of confidence. And so if you're talking about high performance, what is it that maintains that confidence? And when you've lost that confidence, how do you regain it?
When did you lose it then?
Well, you know, I think when I had that backlash, and it obviously did impact, I've learned how to get over it, and and as I say, I'm on a world tour at the moment, and I'm playing, and I'm on a world tour next year as well, and we've just sold out the O2. I should be afforded a certain degree of great confidence. There are thousands of people, but that little naive confidence has gone. I don't know.
Is there almost, and this is a bit of COD psychology, and someone with your background will laugh at me, but is there almost an argument that you don't really want what you had before because of what it brought?
Well, I'd love to think that.
Yeah.
And definitely, I definitely wouldn't want the visibility. I'm in a really lovely place at the moment. I walk down the street and people say, "All right, James, how are you doing?" And they'll get a picture, but they'll be really warm with me, and they won't go mad. And I really do love the balance. So yeah, maybe I'm at ease with that, but another number one wouldn't be averse to it.
Well, let's see it. If you get it, you can come back on the show, and obviously we'll introduce you with a different name. Have you got a favourite of the names?
British public could come up with Blanty Bluntface, obviously. I would prefer Jimmy Spliff.
Very good. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I am.
Perfect. The first one, the 3 non-negotiable behaviours that after all your years of incredible experiences, you hold most dear.
Punctuality. And I aspire to be the most punctual man in rock and roll. Would I ideally be my legacy? We're after 3 good qualities, are we?
Yeah.
So punctuality. I think we've talked about this before, which is respect for other people. Treat others as you would like to be treated, really. And I think that's important. And I think another simple trait really is compassion for others, to understand what it is that others are thinking. And I suppose that goes back, an example is in the army, when I saw 2 sides murdering each other in acts of genocide. If you spoke to one, you could sort of understand where they came from. And if you spoke to the others, you could sort of understand their reasoning. But the fact that they couldn't understand each other and couldn't understand the notion of compassion is where things broke down.
What advice would you give to a teenage James?
Don't take the blue pill.
What's your biggest strength? What's your greatest weakness?
My greatest strength. I think I say yes. My greatest strength is the word yes. I'm up for almost everything and anything.
Nice.
I'll try anyone once.
And your greatest weakness?
And my greatest weakness, I'll try anything once. That's a weakness too.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, and why?
My dad has given me a few, and I think I probably quoted him already about being, everywhere, rather than being in the right place at the right time, being everywhere all the time. He told me, to keep my options open. To give everything a try. To give everything a go in life was probably, it comes from him in many ways.
Too many people don't say how they really feel until it's too late. Monsters is a great example of you doing that. If there was one person in your world who maybe you haven't told them something you'd like to, who is that person, and what would you want to tell them?
I mean, I find that really hard to say in many ways. I have a very close family, and it's probably my mother, actually. I've written my father a song. I probably need to tell my mother what an amazing human being she has been. That's probably, it's every bit of success we talked about at the beginning, from the musical lessons that I hated. I probably need to say thank you.
And the final question, James, is what's your one golden rule for living a high-performance life?
My one golden rule for living a high-performance life, I think it goes back to, it's just two things. I have to say it's 2 things. It's hard work. It's the hard work, and it's the team around you.
James, thank you very much. What an enlightening conversation.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoyed that very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Hey, well, lovely to speak to you both.
Appreciate that.
Struggling to find the motivation? Try this instead.
Take it professionally, not personally.
Why are we postponing love and community and friendship?
I'm not worried if anyone fails, as long as we are changing things for the good.
To have those kinds of friendships, I think, are absolutely essential to being what we would call a high-performance human being.
Take back control over your happiness. Give the high performance app a try. Then see how you feel.